Welcome to session 11 of using Office 365 groups for CIS 3900 final project collaboration. This session 11 will go through part 5 of using the group OneDrive. So this is part 5. So if you haven't seen part 1 through 4, you really need to start there. We introduce what OneDrive is, how the group OneDrive works, how do you use the web applications to edit documents and all of that and create files, how to upload files, how to share files, how to get links to files, how to work on files concurrently, how to do version control and alerting and all sorts of things. So this is the final session on the OneDrive. It is session 11. So in this session, just to kind of go through an introduction here, the OneDrive for Business group feature is built on the Microsoft SharePoint document library platform. So I mentioned that in the last session. So SharePoint is a group collaboration platform. It's more than just a drive, like we're talking about here, like a shared drive. It's much more than that, and it's built really for group and team collaboration all up. And the group. The Office 365 group is essentially a subset of all of that functionality and feature set of that platform wrapped into kind of an easy to use logical construct, again, that we talked about in session 2 whenever we created our group. So because though the OneDrive is built on SharePoint, it inherits many of its useful features to help manage project files. So we went over versioning and we went over alerting in the last session. So that's two features that sort of Group OneDrive inherits from the SharePoint platform. But another one of these features is the addition of document properties or metadata. And we're going to cover that in this session. So the goal of this session is that you'll learn how to use SharePoint document library features of the Group OneDrive to help manage project files. Library settings. So we went through library settings in the previous session, that gear icon, if you'll remember it, to go and look at version settings in Group OneDrive. So we'll do a little more of that here, right? So just to bring that back up, the gear icon I'm talking about, so again, I'm in the Group OneDrive, the gear icon I'm talking about is up here, and then the library settings are there. So there you go. So that's the library settings. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. Often in a project like the one that's required for the final for CIS 3900, it requires a lot of documents and files, right? So in our project, we've done I led a team that did the project, as I mentioned a couple of times. And, we had lots of files. We had a file for every use case diagram, a Visio file. We had a file for every sequence diagram. We had files that had all the class diagrams. We had a file that had the CRC cards in it. So just lots and lots of files, right? And, one of the ways to manage these files could be to create a folder, right? So we could have had a folder that had all of the use case diagrams in it, another folder that had all of the sequence diagrams in it. And that's folders are a good way to manage files. We've been doing that forever. But, there are some limitations. So one is the ability to sort and filter by folders is limited. So we can sort, pretty much by folder name. Sometimes depending upon, the kind of what's going on or the context, you might be able to sort by folder creation date or something like that. But other than that, it's really hard to sort and filter by folders. You can use the search function of like the operating system to search for things inside of folders, but it's really tough to really get sophisticated around sorting and filtering files by folders. Another issue is the contents of a folder can't be viewed without opening the folder. So you don't even know what's in the folder until you open it up. And then finally, a file can only be in one folder. So let's say that I have, a folder called prototypes and another folder called diagrams. Well, what happens if I have a file that is a diagram of a prototype? Well, which folder do I put it in? So it becomes a challenge sometimes because files can't be in multiple folders. So there is a better way, and the better way is in the SharePoint platform, and then consequently in the Group OneDrive, is something called document properties. And it's a better way of organizing files by creating these properties, also known as metadata, that can be used to tag files. So I can create, properties, and then I can tag the files with these properties, and then I can sort and filter and do all sorts of things based on these properties. For example, in our final project, we might want to tag a file with a type of content. So is it a case diagram? Is it a class diagram? Is it a requirements list? What kind of content is in the file. But then we may also want to tag it with what section of the final deliverable it goes in. Well, because this is a case diagram, it goes in section 3. So I may want to tag it with section 3. So that's an example of having multiple tags on the same file. So this process here talks about creating additional documents. So I'm just going to demo that, right? So here you can see that there's a list of columns. So the default columns for a file are titles, so the title of the file, the created, the modified, right? So these are the date and time that the file was created, the date and time, the date and time that the file was modified or the version was modified. You saw that in the version section. Who created the file? Who modified this version of the file? And if we're doing checkout, check in, check out kind of stuff, which we briefly talked about in the last session, who's it checked out to? So let's say I want to create an additional column. Let's say that I wanted a column of, well, let's just use the ones I already have, right? So I created a column called document section and a column called content category, and I'll click on those. So document section, right? So I told it I wanted this particular property column to be a choice type column, right? And then I gave it a list of choices. So does this file, and then remember, I'm going to tag files with this, right? So is this the final deliverable? Is it the table of contents? Is it part of the executive summary? Is this file part of the system request? Is this file part of, the structural model, so on and so forth, right? And then I gave it, told I want it to be a drop-down menu, and I told it, the default choice needs to be final deliverable. On the other hand, this content category, right? So document section, so there was a structural model. So the structural model then might be a CRC card, it might be a class diagram, or it might be an object diagram. So this is that example of I've got one column that talks about what section of the final deliverable that the contents of the file of the document go. And I've got another column that talks about what type of content is in this file. And so the way that works out is if I go back to documents, you can see here that, for example, the glass system proposal final deliverable. Well, it goes in the section final deliverable because it is the final deliverable, and then it's just a general document. Whereas down here, this file it goes in the section functional model, and that's because it's an activity diagram. So you can see I've tagged it with both of these things here. So let's say this document 1 I worked on a second ago. Let's say I want to change its properties because it defaulted to final deliverable and general document, which are the default things that I had set, right? So if I want to change its properties, I click the ... Let me do that again. I click ... I click more. Go back and do that again. I did it really fast. So I click the ... I clicked more, and then I clicked properties. And that's going to take me to the document properties. And when I get there, you can see that I can set, well, this is the document section this thing needs to go in a system request, for example. And the content category is, use case diagram, for example. So there's this edit all button, which sort of gives me kind of a simplified view for editing if I want to edit a bunch of stuff. If I want to, in other words, change the file name, kind of do everything, which I don't want to do. But that's another way of getting there. So now if I go back to documents, the UC40 use case, you see that I changed that. That's actually not it. UC40. Oh, because I've got it sorted by default on section and category. So when I change that, change the mode, which brings me right to my next section. This is actually the power of these document properties, right? So I can sort So I want to sort, based on content category, or I want to sort based on, document section, or I only want to see, things, and I only want to see files that are in the document section functional model. So now you can see that I only get these and so that's a very powerful way to tag and manage these files. So I'll give you a quick example. So when I was assembling the final document, I would be in the functional model section, and I knew that I had to get all of the functional model content from all these files into that final deliverable document. So what I did was I went in here, I filtered on this, and then I went through them one by one, and made sure that I had each one of them, the contents of each one of these files, which are use case diagrams and activity diagrams and whatever, in the file. Well, so that's still a lot of files. So what I did then was I said, okay, I only want to see documents that are whose content is going to go in the functional model section. And right now I'm only interested in activity diagrams. So there you go, right? So I've got even a smaller list to deal with. So it makes this really powerful way of sorting and searching and filtering to get exactly the view of the files that I want. And so that's where document properties come in. So we've already talked about how to assign the metadata, and we talked about use cases of why I might want to do that. One last, sorry for the background there. Let me go back into presentation mode. One last thing I wanted to do, since I didn't show how to create a column there, let me go ahead and do that. So I go to library settings. I see my list of columns. I can create a column. And let's just say that I wanted to create a column that said something like in final deliverable. Right? And so this column, I want to tag files of whether or not I have already incorporated the file's contents into the final deliverable that I've got to turn into Dr. Presamera. So I can simply make this a yes or no column. I can default it to no, right? And I say okay. And I go back to my documents list. And you can see that I've got this one more column over here called in final deliverable. So that way, as I've incorporated the contents of this file, let's say that this use case diagram, once I've incorporated in, I can change that to yes, right? So now let's go back to documents. And now I want to filter out all of the documents that don't have yes there, right? So I only want to see the documents that I haven't incorporated. So you can see how that would help me manage which of these files have had their contents incorporated into the final deliverable. So that was some advanced sort of property management, learning how to manage the project files better. So hopefully as you begin to use Office 365 to help you manage your project files, that'll help you kind of keep track of them and their state, and you'll probably think of a lot more properties that you want to add so that you can manage them.